Hey y'all, welcome to Ghost Towns of Texas. I'm Danny, and today we're going to be talking about my 10 favorite Texas ghost towns. These are all places that I've visited at least once that left the longest, strongest, most lasting impact. I want to issue a disclaimer so that later on after watching this video, nobody feels the need to dash off to the comment section and say something like, any list of the top 10 best ghost towns in Texas that does not include Terlingua is pure communism. Relax, Hank Hill. I didn't say the top 10 best. I said my top 10 favorite. Terlingua is a really cool place, but I've only been there once, and it was when I was 5. Now, I plan on making a return visit to Terlingua someday, and when I do, it'll probably knock one of these towns off of this list. Until then, it didn't make it. Alright, here we go. Our first stop is in Loving County, way out in the crook of the elbow of far west Texas in a weird little place called Mentone. Now, Mentone caught my attention a long time ago when I was a kid scouring a map of the state. I turned the map over to look at the population of the cities and towns on the back, and noticed that Mentone's was listed as 50. Well, having somewhat familiarized myself with the map, I knew it was the county's only settlement, so I thought there is no way the only town in this whole county has only got 50 people in it. Well, turns out there was a way. At the time, this was the late 1980s, the entire county population was approximately 90. Now, it's at this point I feel as though it bears mentioning that Loving County is about exactly half the size of the state of Rhode Island. So that means you had about 90 people occupying about half the land area of an entire U.S. state. Granted, a tiny one, but a state nonetheless. That makes it almost predictable that Loving was the last county in the 48 contiguous United States to report a COVID case. What everybody else refers to as social distancing, they refer to as Wednesday. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Danny, you called Mentone weird. What about the place could actually be considered weird? So many things. First of all, it's not even the first community in the county to be called Mentone. Loving County was actually organized 2 different times, the first in 1893, and the first Mentone was established. It was named after a French surveyor's hometown of Mentone. Apparently he thought the area's geography reminded him of home. Well, if Mentone, France looks anything like Mentone, Texas, I can see why he left. The first Mentone sat pretty much abandoned for 3 years before Loving County on a whole was disorganized and reincorporated into Pecos County. It was reorganized in 1905, and a second community called Mentone was established in 1925. It sat completely abandoned almost until 1931, when the region, almost literally in some cases, exploded when huge deposits of oil were discovered under the Permian Basin. Much like many of the other small towns in this part of the state, Mentone's fortunes, or lack thereof, have been directly tied to one industry. And it ain't tourism. By 1933, there were 600 people living in Mentone, and it had a dance hall, a hotel, a blacksmith, a saloon, several other businesses, and its own newspaper. But with every boom, there's a bust, and Mentone went bust with a bang. By 1940, the population had fallen to 150, and in 1970, the school had to be closed and incorporated with nearby Pecos when its enrollment dropped to 2. Throughout the 70s and 80s, the population continued to drop. They didn't even have running water. Fresh water had to be trucked in from Pecos. The situation continued to get worse, and by 2000, the population of the county had dropped to 67. 19 of which lived in Mentone. It's at that time that Mentone earned the dubious distinction of being the least populated seat of the least populated county in the contiguous 48 United States. An honor it held until 2010, when Gan Valley, South Dakota's population dropped to 14. The rise of the fracking industry has brought a level of prosperity back to the area, and as of 2010, the county population had rebounded to over 180. You might be wondering why people would be actually moving back out to this sparsely populated, desolate, and poor area. While it is sparsely populated and very barren and desolate, it ain't poor. In fact, Loving County residents enjoy the fourth highest per capita income of any county in the state of Texas, and there are 254. Most of the land in Loving County is privately owned, and there is, for lack of a better word, a ton of oil underneath most of it. Energy leases keep the people in Loving County pretty well fed. I personally have visited Mentone twice, and it is a tale of two completely different communities. The first time I went was when my son and I were on our way to the Guadalupe Mountains National Park in 2009. As evidenced by this really crappy footage on an old camcorder, you can see that there's not a whole lot of activity going on. When we arrived in town, we were pretty much the only things moving around with less than 4 legs, 8 legs, or more than no legs. Probably. That last one's a lie. We didn't see any rattlesnakes. Sorry. The only 3 businesses in business in Mentone at the time were the county courthouse, the post office, and a small corner gas station and grocery store that didn't even accept credit cards as a form of payment. When myself and my son walked in, the 3 or 4 people milling about inside immediately stopped what they were doing and looked at us as though we were aliens, which I suppose we may have well been. When you live in a county of 67 people, you have a tendency to recognize faces. When I returned in 2020, Mentone picked up yet another odd distinction as being the only ghost town that I've ever visited in which I got stuck in traffic. As I stated before, with the rise of the fracking industry, the area economy has once again taken an upturn, and the sheer amount of truck traffic going through this tiny little place is ridiculous. Looking around, I noticed that the infrastructure had significantly been improved in the 10 years since my last visit. They now appear to have running water. Several food trucks and RV parks are in the area. And that quaint little corner store we visited in '09, it's closed, but it's been replaced by a new modern Valero across the street, which does take credit cards as form of payment. So, progress?